The Tears of God. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and also the story of Christina and the complete Jew. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I narrate the adventures of the extremely beautiful Indian girl, Aphrodite Khan, and her handsome American lover, Michael Lewinsky, in the Muslim world. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 5. Researching the social life of the Muslim woman in the Islamic world. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 59. Islam is the continuation of the mystery religion that was created in Babylon. Although the Jews finally returned as a people to their promised land, the land that flows with milk and honey, they continued to live under a siege of gross hatred, surrounded now by far more dangerous haters than the ones they had endured their persecution for hundreds of years. The Arabs are more anti-Semitic than the Christians of Europe. Some believe that the Arabs cannot be accused of anti-Semitism because they are also Semitic people, the descendants of the son of Noah, Shem. Many modern scholars have proved this claim is baseless. The Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula today are also the descendants of Ham. Their ancestors were Arab tribes who came from Ham and emigrated from Ethiopia to Yemen. In addition, more than 80% of the Arabs today are originally non-Arab tribes whose ancestors were forcibly converted to Islam and Arabiized. This includes the Muslim Copts of Egypt, the Berbers, also known as Amazigh, of North Africa, the Chaldeans and the Kurds of Iraq, the Assyrians of Syria, the Africans of Mauritania, and the so-called Black Arabs of North Sudan and Somalia. Although the Somalis do not speak Arabic still, they are included in the League of the Arab States, which is a regional organization in the Arab world. Therefore, none of the so-called Arabs today are Semitic, or the descendants of Shem, the son of Noah. Without exception, all of them are Hamitic, descendants of Ham, the son of Noah. In truth, anti-Semitism is just a term created by historians to refer to unjustifiable hatred toward the Jews. Such hatred does not arise from the fact that they are the descendants of Shem, but because they are accused of being Christ killers, homeless people, and the nation of parasites. They poisoned the wells of Christians, kidnapped non-Jewish children, killed them, and used their blood to make their feasts cakes. People who are plotting to take over the world, their existence poses danger to the entire human race. When Hitler's Nazis and their collaborators murdered 6 million Jewry in Europe, historians found anti-Semitism no longer a proper description for the gross hatred directed toward the Jewish people, and defined it as the Holocaust. Let us be truly clear on this. The hatred of the Arabs and Muslims toward the Jews is neither racial nor politically motivated. It is deeply rooted in their religious texts' teachings. No one in the entire world can claim to be a true Muslim and still love the Jews. The Quran bears testimony that Allah despises the Jews, see Surah Al-Fatiha 1, verse 7. In that sense, there is no human term that can rightly quantify the magnitude of enmity the Muslims in general, and the Arabs in particular harbor toward the Jews. Every day, each Muslim stands 5 times before his God Allah, and recites a verse from his Holy Quran 17 times. The above verse, and the emphasis of its repetition, describes how the wrath of Allah abides with the Jews. The verse commands the Muslim to say to his Allah during his daily prayers, "Guide us to the straight way, the right way of those people on who you have bestowed your grace on them, the Muslims, not the wrong way of the people who earned your wrath, the Jews, nor of those who went astray, the Christians." In real life, the endemic hatred of Jews in the Muslim culture is entirely part and parcel of his religious dogma, and if he does not stand testimony to it, he must throw his Quran away. It is a lie that Muslims hate the Jews simply because they occupy what was once supposedly Muslim land. It is closer to the truth that the Muslims have issues with the race of people their God Allah hates, who is living next door. The hatred and enmity go back to a time before the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948. It goes back to the time when Muhammad exiled all the Jews from his newly founded Islamic state and massacred over 100 surrendered Jews in cold blood. Palestinians are proud of that massacre and cry on the streets, "Khabar O Jews, the army of Muhammad is coming again." That is why the leaders of Iran have vowed to wipe Israel off the world's map. Likewise, Hamas, Hezbollah, and their sympathizers want to throw all Jews into the Mediterranean Sea. These Muslim leaders and every Muslim want to do their bit of completely annihilating all Jews of the world, thinking that they are doing a favor for God. They are no different from Hitler and everyone who assisted him in his mass murder of 6 million Jews. Muhammad promised Muslims that in the end time, they were going to kill all Jews of the world. After all, Hitler thought that he was doing the work of the Lord Jesus Christ when he planned and carried out the Holocaust. In this regard he wrote in his infamous book, "Hence today I believe that I am acting following the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the Lord." If anyone has in his heart an iota of hatred toward the Jews, he cannot claim to be a true follower of Christ. Anti-Semitism comes from Satan, and it brings with it God's wrath, while the love of Jews comes from God with it, heralds God's blessings. See Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. The Jews are the chosen people, and shall continue to be God's beloved ones. I say then, hath God cast away his people, the Jews? God forbid. God hath not cast away his people. But as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sakes. See Romans chapter 11, verses 1 to 2 and 28. These verses show that God has never cast away his chosen people, and they continue to be his beloved forever for their Father's sake, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all other Jewish patriarchs. Therefore, those who called themselves Christians and still participated in the Holocaust, or kept silent, and did nothing while those innocent Jews were killed, had nothing to do with Christ except carrying his name in falsehood. A true follower of Christ is born again from above through the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit has been added to the true Church of Christ, which is his body and bride. When the Mujahideen of ISIS killed the Shiite Muslims, enslaved, and sold the Yazidi women and children, and drove the Iraqi Christians from their homes, the whole world protested, and more than 70 countries joined the US-led coalition that initiated multiple airstrikes against ISIS, which ultimately led to the destruction of its Islamic Caliphate in Syria and Iraq and the recent death of its caliph, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. When the Palestinian children's fatalities were reported during the Israeli airstrikes against Hamas militants who fired their rockets to indiscriminately kill every Jewish man, woman, and child, the entire world stood up against Israel, while no one seemed to care about the evils caused by the actions of the terrorists of Hamas. Why is there the same lack of concern just because the victims are Jews? Are they not entitled to collateral damage as a defensive tool? The symbol in the flag of Nazi Germany was the swastika, which is also a holy symbol in Hinduism and Buddhism. Many Muslim countries put in their flags the crescent, which is the symbol of the moon god Allah, who was the Babylonian god Baal. Like Hindus, Muslims worship the pagan Arabs' god, the stone idol, and like Buddhists, they worship the founder of their religion, Prophet Muhammad, and worship the woman's pussy, the black stone, like the Jains who worship the phallus of Mahavira. Therefore, there is no difference between Nazism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. All these religions worship symbols and their founders, and all of them have the same origin. They can be traced back to the mystery religion of Babylon, which had been created by Satan through the Babylonian king god, Nimrod, and his consort goddess, Semiramis, and her sun god, Tammuz. Semiramis murdered her husband Nimrod when she came to know that he was planning to kill her because she became pregnant with an illegitimate child. She was impregnated by one of the priests of her temple, where thousands of prostitutes offered themselves to the male worshippers. Tammuz murdered his mother Semiramis when he learned about her secret plot to kill him. Satan was worshipped through this first dysfunctional Babylonian family. After their death, Nimrod continued to be worshipped as the sun god and Semiramis as the moon goddess. She became known as the Great Mother, Divine Mother, Virgin Mother, and Queen of Heaven. The names of those Babylonian gods and goddesses kept changing from culture to culture. The Babylonians called King Nimrod, the god Marduk, Bel, and Nebo, and his wife Semiramis became the goddess Astarte. For the ancient Canaanites, Marduk was introduced as Baal and worshipped as the sun god. He was also worshipped by the Phoenicians, Syrians, and Egyptians. The Bible mentioned that the people of the first human kingdom of Babel decided to settle in Mesopotamia and build their Tower of Babel and worship the first man-made religion of Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. Babel means the gate of God. God confounded their language, destroyed their tower, and scattered them all over the earth. See Genesis 11, verses 1 to 9. From that time, people started to speak in different languages, dispersed all over the world, and wherever they went they carried with them that first satanic virus of the Babylonian mystery religion. Ever since, every man-made religion was simply a disguised form of that mystery religion, and all the different names of gods and goddesses were the names of the first three people who were worshipped by people instead of God: King Nimrod, his consort Semiramis, and their son, Tammuz. Satan was worshipped by proxy through those gods and goddesses. The goddess Semiramis became known in Greece as Aphrodite or Athena, in Egypt as Isis, in Canaan Ishtar, in Ephesus as Diana, in Israel as Ashtoreth, in Phoenicia as Europa. She also became the name of the whole continent of Europe, in Rome as Venus, and in India as Kali or Sita. She also has been given many titles such as Queen of Heaven, the Great Mother, Mother Goddess, and Mother Nature. She also was worshipped with her son, Tammuz, as the mother-child god and goddess. This mystery religion created by Satan empowered the dysfunctional Babylonian family and spread all over the world. We refer to it as a mystery religion because Satan promised to reveal the secret knowledge that God supposedly hid from Adam and Eve when they were in the Garden of Eden. A knowledge that will enable them to become gods or enable them to gain their salvation through their good works. It is also given the term mystery because Satan deceived men by making him believe that through studying the stars, astrology, he could discern his destiny. However, in the next chapter after Genesis chapter 11, that is Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, God initiated a plan for human salvation. He chose a man called Abram from Mesopotamia to Babylonia, today Iraq, and gave him for promises: 1. He will give him a land, the land of Canaan. 2. He will make him a great nation, the nation of Israel. 3. He will bless those who will bless that nation and curse those who curse them. And 4. Through his seed, Christ, he is going to bless all the families of the earth. God confirmed this Abrahamic covenant to his sons Isaac, Jacob, Israel, the 12 patriarchs, and to their descendants, the children of Israel, throughout the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. Through that single nation, God is going to redeem men from his sin. God is going to incarnate as a human and die on the cross for the sins of the entire world. He is going to take the punishment of men and offer the free gift of salvation to men, and that can be received by faith in Jesus through grace. God continued to reveal his plan of salvation through the Jews, culminating in the arrival of his Son into the world. Through Christ, God communicated his final stage of human redemption. The promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3 was not fulfilled to all families on earth until Christ died on the cross, was raised from the grave on the third day, and the gospel was offered to all nations. Satan tried to prevent the spread of the gospel through various tricks, but the good news reached many nations. Satan then used his old trick of mystery religion and began to create cults and many man-made religions. He also began gradually corrupting the church until he established his Christendom. He made his pope replace Christ and Mary to be co-redemptive with Jesus Christ. Nevertheless, the true believers in Christ continued to persevere amid misinformation and false dogma, enduring much persecution and opposition in the process. After 6 centuries of endless efforts, Satan finally succeeded in twisting the promise to Abraham, rechanneling it through his son Ishmael instead of Isaac. He raised his own false prophet and used him to create works-based salvation. He invented a new form of a mystery religion that teaches that man can earn his salvation through his honorable deeds. Through his self-appointed prophet, the devil managed to deceive millions, by today's count, 1.2 billion followers. The self-appointed prophet rejected the divinity of Christ and considered it the greatest form of shirk, unbelief of associating partners to God. He also condemned all the basic tenets of the Christian faith. He rejected the Incarnation, the Holy Trinity, the crucifixion, the death of Jesus on the cross, and the resurrection of Christ from the grave. In short, he completely wrote off the entire Christianity as blasphemy and the work of the devil. His followers persecuted the followers of Christ and killed 60 million of them during the spread of their religion in Christendom. Satan tried to wipe Christians out of existence, as he had tried with the Jews before. The Christians that he failed to corrupt, he decided to destroy with his new army of Muslim mujahideen. With Christians, the devil played every dirty trick to get rid of them. He accused them of corrupting the pure message of Jesus, and therefore created a justification for the followers of his puppet prophet to use their swords to chastise those who changed the word of God. The self-ordained prophet blocked his followers from joining Christianity and threatened to kill everyone who dared to forsake his new religion, through the law of apostasy. With the children of Israel, the devil adopted diverse ways to bring about their destruction. From the time God anointed a nation, Satan was clear the nation would bring about his ultimate destruction. He tried to destroy them in Egypt through his puppet Pharaoh but failed. He attempted to destroy all of them through Haman of Persia, and God intervened once again. He made many attempts through the Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, Muslims, Crusaders, and other European kings and religious authorities, but God always frustrated his attempts. Nonetheless, Satan does not give up. His is the do-it-or-die-for-it scenario. He continued to abuse and persecute them through various forms of anti-Semitism. In recent history, he came remarkably close to achieving his goal with Nazi Germany and its collaborators. God stretched out his hand and saved them, took them from the death camps, and brought them on the wings of eagles back to their promised land. Satan redirected his efforts by filling the hearts of 200 million Arabs with gross hatred, resulting in many attempts to destroy the state of Israel, none of which prevailed. He then spread the cause of anti-Semitism to over 1.5 billion Muslims, and untold millions of their sympathizers from other religions and nations. I strongly believe the false prophet mentioned in the book of Revelation is referring to Muhammad, the founder of Islam. I would like to explain why I think that Muhammad is the false prophet charged with assisting the beast or the Antichrist, mentioned in the book of Revelation. First of all, let me say that according to the Bible, there are 2 religions in the world. The first one is a false religion created by that dysfunctional Babylonian family, which is known as mystery religion in Genesis chapter 11. The second religion is the plan of God for the salvation of mankind, which started by God in Genesis chapter 12. He chose a man, Abraham, and promised to give him a son, Isaac. That son will find a nation of Israel, and such plan of redemption of mankind from sin shall be fulfilled or completed by Christ through his incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection, Orthodox Judaism and true Christianity. Many people claim that Islam is also belonging to the two Judeo-Christian religions, as one of the valid Abrahamic religions. I would like to show that this claim is absolutely a false claim, and the real source of Islam is the mystery religion of Babylon. Having said this, let me go back and trace the beginning of this pseudo-religion of the Arabs. The mystery religion, which was the foundation and source of all false and man-made religions, began in a brothel by a beautiful Iraqi prostitute named Semiramis. This was her Greek name, but in the Babylonian language she was known as Samira Mat, which means the gift of the sea. Semiramis was an extremely beautiful woman. She was Babylonian by birth and lived her life in Mesopotamia, land between two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. Satan used her to start the first temple prostitution worship in the world. The first king in the world, Nimrod, was originally from the land of Cush, today Ethiopia or Sudan. He became a mighty tyrant and began to conquer other lands until he arrived at the city of Babel, today in Iraq. He established his kingdom there. Soon after, he saw the beautiful prostitute Semiramis, and was enchanted by her marvelous beauty and sexy body. He took her out of the brothel and made her his queen. He created different stories to alter her origin, legitimizing her. She became a virgin who came out of the water, and in some accounts born of a fish. Yet another tale tells how a shepherd boy found her at the riverbank when she was just a small infant born, took her to his family, where she was raised there. This miraculous origin qualified Semiramis to be not only the wife of King Nimrod, but as a queen goddess too. She was the one who convinced Nimrod to build the Tower of Babel, and exalted him as a king god. Then she began to introduce her satanic mystery religion, which she learned at the brothel. She claimed that through her mystery religion, people could gain access to the secret knowledge that Lucifer revealed to Adam and Eve at the Garden of Eden, when they ate the apple from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Through this secret knowledge, man could obtain godhood and become a god. So she claimed that her mystery religion could help its followers obtain knowledge about their future through astrology, the belief that human destiny and the knowledge of the entire universe could be obtained through studying the stars. Today we call those occult practices horoscopes. Her mystery religion developed and began to introduce many occult practices such as astrology, divination, sorcery, witchcraft, magic charms, omens, mediums, and spirits. The Bible strictly warns us against engaging in those occult practices. See Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19, chapter 18, verses 9 to 14, 1 Samuel chapter 31, verses 1 to 6, Acts of the Apostles chapter 9, verses 18 to 20, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31, chapter 20, verse 6, Isaiah chapter 8, verse 19, chapter 47, verses 13 to 15, Ezekiel chapter 13, verse 20, and Zechariah chapter 10, verse 2. If you carefully examine most religions other than Judeo-Christian, Orthodox Judaism, and true Christianity, you will find its followers are engaged in occultism, idol worship, or sexual immorality. For example, if we look at Hinduism, we will discover it is nothing except magic rituals such as puja and idol worship. There are 330 million gods in Hinduism. The goddess of evil, Kali, the elephant god of luck, Ganpati, in English Ganesh, the monkey god, Hanuman, Lord Krishna, the Lord Rama, Lord Shiva, the Lord Vishnu, the goddess Durga, and the goddess Mahalakshmi, just to name a few. Islam also combined all the occult practices of a mystery religion. Its followers worship the black stone, which is in the form of a woman's pussy, and is left over from the ancient Arab temple prostitution rituals. The Bible strictly warns true believers in God against idol worship. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow to them or worship them. Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 to 5. Every day, Muslims face the black Kaaba housing this black stone, and bow down to it in worship. If the religion of Islam derived from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it should not have occult practices such as idol worship and the pagan Hajj rituals. Islam included to this day immoral sexual practices initiated by the female brothel keeper Semiramis. It allows its followers to practice adultery by engaging in sexual relationships with four women at the same time. The same verse permits them to have sex without the marriage bond with female slaves, whether they are obtained through warfare or bought from the slave markets. See Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3. It also permits its followers to marry underage girls. See Surah Al-Talaq 64, verse 5. In addition to all this immoral and evil promiscuity, Islam teaches about the virgins of paradise. Believing that they are going to receive 72 eternal virgins, many Muslims willingly blow themselves into smithereens. Suicide bombers are nothing but another form of human sacrifice to the devil which the ancient Canaanites practiced, offering their children in fire to Molech, Marduk, Baal, Nimrod. The fire god Molech was the tutelary deity of the children of Ammon, and essentially identical with the Moabitish Chemosh. Fire gods appear to have been common to all the Canaanite, Syrian, and Arab tribes, who worshipped the destructive element under an outward symbol, with the most inhuman rites, quoting Hitchcock's Bible Names Dictionary, Molech. Idol worship, immoral practices, and human sacrifices are the tenets of a mystery religion that the devil introduced through Semiramis, Nimrod, and Tammuz. Islam is no different from all man-made religions, Satan's inspired religions, such as Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, Confucianism, Shinto, and Taoism. If we examine them, we will find in them there are some or all the occult practices of the Babylonian mystery religion. Let us now look at how Muhammad gradually introduced his followers to Satanism. The life of Muhammad revealed to us how he became involved in the occult. His life resembled the life of the very same Babylonian family whom Satan used to introduce his mystery religion. Muhammad's biography shows that he married a woman who was already introduced to the practice of sorcery through her former two husbands. Both her husbands were sorcerers, and she eventually became a sorceress too. When she married her third husband, Muhammad, she was 15 years older than him, and fully under the control of the devil. She was possessed by the spirit of Jezebel, which was the spirit of Semiramis. It is the spirit of control, domination, and intimidation. The Bible tells us how the very same evil spirit had controlled the wife of the Jewish king Ahab, who was called Jezebel. Jezebel was a Phoenician woman, today Lebanese. God forbade the children of Israel to marry strange women. Jezebel killed all the prophets of God and introduced to Israel her pagan god, Baal, and goddess, Ashtoreth. She threatened to kill the most powerful prophet in Israel, Elijah. The same spirit led Semiramis to murder her husband, Nimrod. It is also the same spirit that led her to attempt the murder of her son, Tammuz. But her son came to know about her plot and killed her before she could assassinate him. It is the very same spirit that controlled the first wife of Muhammad, Khadijah. She was an extraordinarily rich merchant woman. She was called the Princess of Mecca. At the age of 40, she had already married two sorcerers. Muhammad was 25 when that powerful woman married him. In the Arab culture, a marriage of this sort is considered a scandal. The Arab man will not marry a woman who is senior to him, and who has lost her virginity when she marries her other two husbands. So, it was a beneficial marriage for both parties. Her third husband Muhammad was just a small employee in her caravan business. Khadijah wanted a young man in her bed, and she had other plans for him. Although she was a rich woman, the death of her former husbands deprived her of the occult practices that she had become addicted to. In the Arab culture, the woman who practices sorcery is condemned as a witch. Quite the opposite, Arab men who practice divination and sorcery are accorded respect. Such a man is called kahin, which means a sorcerer. Pagan Arabs did not distinguish between the Kahin and the prophet. For them, both were persons who claimed to possess secret knowledge to obtain through God or from jinn. Anyone losing his camel, or some precious thing, would go to the Kahin for help in locating his property. Before she lost her 2 husbands, Khadija's house was like a hospital crowded with visitors seeking consultation and paying consultation fees. After she married Muhammad, she found herself being hooked to a plain man who had nothing in him to attract others. She involved him in her sorcery, but she could not succeed in making a powerful sorcerer out of him. So she switched to another facet of sorcery, prophethood. Somehow, she convinced him to claim to be the prophet of Mecca. She sought the help of her male cousin, Waraka ibn Nawfal. Waraka was also a sorcerer who repented and became a Christian, a follower of Arian Christianity, which teaches that Jesus is not God but a created human being. The Mun Waraka did not last for long in that false form of Christianity. He apostatized and became a follower of a newly established Arab cult called Hanafiya. The followers of this cult rejected idol worship and claimed that they were worshipping the God of the Arabs' father, Abraham. From Waraka and through his many caravan trips to Syria, Muhammad was introduced to the stories of the Old Testament prophets. However, he was introduced to a distorted form of Christianity that permeated the Arabian Peninsula through the Arian priests and monks. There is a well-known story mentioned by all Islamic authentic books that tells of Muhammad's meeting with a Christian monk by the name of Bahira, who identified him as the future prophet of God, as foretold by the prophets of the Bible. Khadija began to instill in the mind of her young husband the idea of becoming a prophet of Mecca and possibly the entire of Arabia. Muhammad preached his religion to the Arabs only, but after his death, his followers spread it out of the Arabian Peninsula at the tips of their swords and spears. In the beginning, Muhammad was not at all interested in being a Kahin or prophet. He considered the Kahin and the prophet were essentially poets. At that time, the Arabs believed all 3 were possessed by jinn or demons and could use them to obtain hidden or secret knowledge which is not privy to ordinary human beings. In his biography, Muhammad said, "None of God's creatures more I hate than an ecstatic poet or a mun possessed." By a mun possessed he meant a Kahin or a prophet. Nevertheless, Khadija exerted full control over him, and hence manipulated him to accept her ideas. She wanted him to claim to be a prophet, and through such a claim, she could be seen to have married a husband who had prominent status in the society of Mecca. She was like the woman Semiramis who convinced her tyrant husband, King Nimrod, to claim to be a god and demand worship from his subjects. After killing him, she told his subjects that her husband became an immortal god and was to be worshipped as the sun god, known in the Middle East as Baal, Marduk, El, Elah, and Allah. She also predicted that after her departure she would continue to be a goddess and likewise, destined to be worshipped as the moon goddess surrounded by the stars, Ishtar and Ashtoreth. She was the one who introduced the worship of the crescent and the star, which became the symbol of the Arabs' god, Allah. Islam has since and until today adopted it. Khadija's plan began to unfold gradually during her lifetime. Her husband claimed that an angel of God appeared to him while he was worshipping in a cave and gave him a message to his people. According to the Sirah, biography of Muhammad, Khadija was the first person to believe his claim. The initial message of Muhammad was simple and mainly glorified the greatness of God and his creation. It was directed at the polytheists of Mecca. It advised them to turn away from idol worship and instead worship the God of the people of the book, Jews and Christians, who were initially recognized as the only people who have true books from God. The message at that time was also based on a peaceful approach and gave everyone freedom of choice. Women were treated as equal to men in every respect, and Muhammad remained married to only one woman. There is sufficient evidence in the verses of the Quran that during this period that the verses of the Quran had dictated to Muhammad by Waraka ibn Nawfal. The old man Waraka was the main maker of the verses of the Quran at the Meccan period. Until this period, Muhammad was a mere puppet in the hands of his powerful wife, Khadija, and the apostatized cousin, Waraka. Waraka suddenly died and created a fundamental problem for Khadija and Muhammad. Waraka was a powerful kahin and a possessed poet. He used to get the verses that he dictated to Muhammad through the jinn that possessed him. After the death of Waraka, Muhammad fell into despair and became suicidal. According to an authentic hadith of al-Bukhari, Muhammad made several attempts to commit suicide after Waraka died, and with him, the source of his alleged divine inspiration ceased. But after a few days, the moon Waraka died and the divine inspiration also paused for a while, and the Prophet became so sad as we heard that he intended several times to throw himself from the tops of high mountains, and every time he went up to the top of a mountain to throw himself down, Gabriel would appear before him and say, "O Muhammad, you are indeed Allah's apostle in truth," whereupon his heart would become quiet, and he would calm down, and would return home. And whenever the period of the coming of the inspiration used to become long, he would do as before, but when he used to reach the top of a mountain, Gabriel would appear before him and say to him that he had said before. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 9, Hadith number 111. For a brief period, Khadija supported her husband and encouraged him to continue his mission as a God-sent prophet. From this point, Muhammad started to create his own verses for the Quran. He decided the direction and the content of his messages. Should he continue the peaceful approach initiated by Waraka, or change his direction and invent his own course of action? Muhammad decided to turn the tide and proceed in the opposite direction. It was clear that Waraka's peaceful approach did not gain many followers. The people of Mecca only ridiculed him and flatly rejected his message. They told him to his face that he was an impostor, sorcerer, and madman. They also told him that the stories of the Jewish and Arab prophets which he incorporated in his Quran were already known by them. Some of them began to attack him physically. There was a story of a powerful Arab woman who came with an axe to kill him because he insulted her through his Quran. After Waraka died, the Quran lost its charm and moral standards, beginning to use vulgar language in the context of its opponents. For example, an Arabman said to Muhammad, "You are a madman." The Quran responded by calling the man son of a bitch. See Surah Kalam 68, verse 13. Before he recovered from his loss, Muhammad lost his wife too. Khadija died and left him with no one to direct his next move. The death of those two relatives had left him in a vacuum which turned him towards suicide again. Muhammad made several attempts to commit suicide by trying to throw himself from the high mountains. No one would resort to such violent means of suicide unless he was in serious trouble or mentally disturbed. The two persons who made him a prophet had suddenly died and left him alone to face the hostile Meccan society. None of the three conspirators had anticipated that their secret conspiracy would end up this way. Until this time, Muhammad could not have known that the true source of his new religion was Satan, and not the two whom he had suddenly lost. Satan always looks for tyrant rulers, sorcerers, and people who are willing to claim to be the prophets of God. He knows that it is through these types of evil men that he can rain much destruction upon the world. The false prophet is an abomination to God because he tells lies about God. The tyrant rulers, like Nimrod, Pharaoh, Nero, and Hitler, exalted themselves and wanted people to fear them and worship them instead of God. This shows that Satan cannot just choose any ruler or any person and turn him into a tyrant or false prophet. After the death of the two evil schemers, Waraka and Khadija, the message of the Quran underwent drastic changes. The new verses of the Quran lost their magical tone and poetical spirit. They are no longer short and full of rhythm. They became lengthy and boring. They are penned in plain vernacular Arabic, which could be written by laymen. Before the death of the plotters, Waraka and Khadija, the only source of the new religion was the Quran, but now a new source was introduced known as the hadiths, sayings and deeds of the Prophet. They are also considered to be divinely revealed, and have the same religious and legal binding as the verses of the Quran. The Quran also endorsed the divine origin of the hadith and said about Muhammad, "He does not speak out of low desires. It is not but inspiration inspired." Surah Al-Najm 53, verses 3 to 4. 80% of today's Sharia laws are made from the hadiths. Muhammad could now dictate his new laws by using everyday ordinary street language, which is spoken by anybody. The initial peaceful approach was abrogated and replaced by a violent approach. Accepting or rejecting the message of the new religion was no more a matter of choice. Everyone in Arabia had to become Muslim or suffer death. Anyone who leaves Islam must be killed as an apostate. After this new development, Muhammad claimed that he had been commanded by Allah to fight and kill people until they accepted his new religion. An exemption was made for the people of the book if they agreed to pay the jizya. Nevertheless, the encounter of Muhammad with the Jews revealed that this exemption, if any, was rarely implemented. Everywhere his followers went, they killed Christians and enslaved and raped their women and children, confiscated their properties, and occupied their lands. After the departure of Khadijah, Muhammad suddenly became a violent and tyrannical ruler. With the death of Khadijah, the spirit of Jezebel and Semiramis lost control of the new prophet, and the violent spirit of Baal and Nimrod took over. Muhammad suddenly became violent and hostile. His message became the message of a tyrant who dictates his no uncertain terms to his people. It was clear that he was possessed by the violent spirit of the tyrant Nimrod. He began to assassinate anyone who disagreed with him or composed poems to criticize him. He even arranged the assassinations of two poetess women who composed verses criticizing his violent nature, Asma bint Marwan and Gurfa. He also began to marry many women, and in a fleeting period accumulated a large number of harems for his personal satisfaction. He even married a child of 6, Aisha. In her time, Khadijah kept him under close watch and did not allow him to take on another wife. That impediment, like many others, had been removed. Many non-Muslim scholars struggled to understand the split personality of the Quran. Why does a book supposedly inspired by God contain within it two contradictory messages? Some verses teach a peaceful message, and some verses dictate violence. It is no surprise that many scholars are still frustrated by the irreconcilable messages of the Meccan period and the Medinan period. Muslim scholars invented a law known as abrogation to reconcile the split personality of the Quran. They simply claimed that the later message of Medina abrogated the one before it. They argued that when Islam was weak and Muhammad had a few followers, God granted freedom of choice, but when Islam gained strength because of its many followers, freedom is henceforth forbidden, and Islam is the only acceptable religion to God. For an outsider, this solution further complicates the issue it tries to solve. How God could say initially, no compulsion in religion, and then turn around and say, kill infidels wherever you find them. Why would God's inspired word command his prophet to fight and kill people until they bear witness that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad his messenger? Well, such difficulty does not arise for the person who understands that the Quran has two contradictory messages because it has two sources, the old man Warqa ibn Nawfal and Muhammad ibn Abdullah. What makes the religion of Muhammad different from all other religions of the world is its violent message and misogynistic teachings. His teachings degraded women and placed them in status lower than animals. It introduced many new teachings alien to the tenets of other religions such as jihad for spreading Islam by the sword, the law of apostasy which orders killing those who leave Islam, polygamy, wife-beating, child marriage, the concept of right hand possessed, which permits sex with female slaves out of the marriage bond, slavery, virgins of paradise, cruel hatred toward non-believers, and of course anti-Semitism. Before this term was invented, Muhammad persecuted and killed the Jews and called them brothers of apes and pigs. He exiled all Jews out of Arabia and confiscated their homes and properties. He showed cruel hatred toward the Jews. Muhammad proved with no outside help that he embodied the values of the Antichrist. He also showed that he was completely controlled by the devil through the violent religion he and his followers spread all over the world, resulting in the deaths of 80 million Hindus and 60 million Christians during the Islamic invasions of the Christian and Hindu lands. Now I would address the overhanging question as to whether Muhammad is the false prophet in the Book of Revelation. Of course, 14 centuries ago, Muhammad died and went to hell. After his death, his followers, empowered by his violent message, went all over the world spreading his satanic religion by the sword. His religion, on the other hand, remained in the mortal world, growing from strength to strength. Islam now is considered the fastest-growing religion in the world, 1.2 billion Muslims and Muslimas. We need to look at the driving force that keeps his religion going and catalyzes the violence associated with it. Nimrod and Semiramis died a long time ago in history, but their mystery religion never died with them. Instead, its legacy keeps manifesting itself in every culture and multiplying beyond its original boundaries. The only book that guides us in our search for an answer in the Bible. We now know that the main source of all man-made religions is Satan, and hence their origin can be traced back to his mystery religion which he created in Babylon. The Bible calls Babylon the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. See Revelation chapter 17, verse 5. The Bible also says, a second angel followed and said, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries. Revelation chapter 14, verse 8. While these two verses speak about the earthly city of Babylon, they also point at the future of that city. We know that the earthly kingdom of Babylon of Nimrod and Semiramis disappeared many years ago. Accordingly, the book of Revelation speaks about the spiritual kingdom of darkness that Lucifer had created and spread all over the world. Mystery, Babylon the Great, mystery religion of Satan, mother of all prostitutes and abominations of the world, religions of the world that originated from the mystery religion of Babylon. The end of all those abominable religions is stated as follows: Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. The final abode of Satan and his spiritual kingdom of darkness, and his evil spirits, and those who follow him will be in the lake of fire. See the book of Revelation chapter 18, verses 2 to 3. Before we end this chapter, it is important to find out what the Bible says about the origin of Satan, sin, and the fall of the devil and men. The Bible tells us that Satan is behind every form of worship which does not originate in God. The books of Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28 refer specifically to the kings of Babylon and Tyre. They also reference the spiritual power behind these kings, namely Satan. From these passages, we understand that Satan is an archangel called Lucifer, means morning star, who was created perfectly by God. He rebelled against God due to his sin of pride. Satan desired to be God, not the servant of God. He wanted to overthrow God from his throne, occupy it, and be the ruler of the entire universe. He convinced 1/3 of the angels to join his rebellion. But they were defeated by God's army of angels led by the archangel Michael. Lucifer and his angels were cast out of heaven and became evil spirits or demons. Then Satan tempted the woman Eve and caused her and her husband, Adam, to sin against God. Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 14. He told them that they could obtain the divinity of God and become like God through knowledge of good and evil. Due to Adam's rebellion, sin entered the world and passed to all men, and with it came death and curse, and every human being becomes a sinner by birth. The fall of man enabled Satan to be the ruler of this world. The Gospel of John chapter 12, verse 31. He is also called the God of this world. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. He controls all the evil and corrupt religious leaders, rulers, and kings of the world. They are mere puppets in his hands, and he can direct them to do his evil deeds. It is Satan who controls through his demons dangerous Islamic terrorist groups such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Taliban, Hamas, and Hezbollah. He makes them extremely evil and leads them to behead people they deem as infidels. When we see a video showing ISIS Muslim terrorists burning someone alive or beheading a defenseless victim, it is the demon that controlled and inspired them to commit such nefarious deeds. Despite this fact, Satan does not have absolute power over everything. God is still sovereign and in control, and Satan can do nothing without his knowledge and permission. See the book of Job. The loving and just God would not allow Satan to pick up anyone at random and turn him into his tool of destruction. We have seen in the case of his first pickup, the devil found a female brothel keeper, Semiramis, who engaged in immoral practices of selling her body to men and gaining income through engaging other women to do the same. He also discovered the first tyrant, Nimrod, who rebelled against God and established his kingdom. Nimrod means we rebel. Along with those two, Satan formed his first evil trinity and created that mystery religion, which made people worship him rather than God. Through that first religion, Satan caused the first joint human rebellion against God in the city of Babylon by building the Tower of Babel. At that time, all human beings spoke one language, most probably Hebrew. God confounded their language, made them all speak different languages, and scattered them all over the world. Every group of people began to speak a language understood by them only. Therefore, divided due to different languages, the people went in all directions, carrying with them the seeds of their rebellion and the virus of that mystery religion. We saw the same pattern repeated in the case of the founder of Islam. Satan did not just choose an innocent Arab man living in the remote corner of the arid desert of Arabia and made him his false prophet, and through him, he deceived and leveraged the deception of millions upon millions of human beings. The devil found an opportunist woman, Khadijah, who engaged in all sorts of evil practices, sorcery, deception, selfish ambition, etc. Through those practices, she amassed wealth and became a merchant woman. Along with her, Satan also found an Arab man who was prepared to do anything to get what he wanted. Muhammad agreed to do everything his selfish wife required him to do for her. When she asked him to pretend to be a prophet, he did not object or refuse. He willingly joined the evil conspiracy and sold himself to Satan. The old man Waraka ibn Nawfal was another available and willing evil conspirator. Before joining the Satanic Trinity, he already joined 3 religious cults: Arab polytheism, the Aryan Christian cult, and the false Arab cult of Hanafiya, which its adherents claimed to be the followers of the religion of Abraham, who they believed to be the father of the Jews and Arabs. Satan used those 3 Arabs who were already prepared for their hearts to do evil, and used them to create the deadliest religion he had ever created. Islam does not mean peace, but it means an absolute and unquestionable surrender to the will of Allah. By now we know who Allah is, the idol of the moon god. Remember, behind every false religion is an idol, behind every idol is a demon, and behind every demon is Satan worshipped by proxy. And I do not need to remind you who Satan is. But in case you forgot, just read those biblical verses, Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 12 to 18, Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 to 14, and Revelation chapter 12, verses 3 to 9, and ask God to guide you to the truth of Jesus Christ, who defeated Satan on the cross and offers to you his free gift of salvation. Although Satan rebelled and was cast out of heaven along with his fallen angels, he continues to rule this world through his puppet rulers and deceive the world with his false prophets. By creating false religions, he blinds people and makes them worship him rather than God. People worship him through idols, sacred objects, symbols, saints, and many other religious rituals. The Apostle Paul stated that behind every idol is a demon, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 19 to 20. In Psalm 96, verse 5, God said, "For all the gods of the nations are idols." This means that the God Allah, the moon god, whom the Muslims worship in the Black Kaaba in Mecca, is an idol, and behind that Satan is worshipped by proxy. Every Muslim is required wherever he or she is to face the Black Kaaba, or the Black Stone, offer 5 prayers, and bow down to it 17 times a day. By worshipping the idols of the Kaaba and its Black Stone, Muslims are worshipping the demons behind them. 1 Corinthians, chapter 8, verses 4-6. When over 2 million Muslims go every year to Mecca and perform their Hajj rituals and offer their animal sacrifices, they sacrifice to demons. See the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 32, verses 17-18. Paul said, "The things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God." 1 Corinthians, chapter 10, verses 19-20. Since the Bible clearly defines idolatry as the worship of demons, and since demons are personalities, which desire the worship of human beings, it is fair to conclude the characterization of such deities as Zeus, Ammonius Ra, Demeter, and Isis were simply the classical names attributed to specific fallen spirits. In other words, Apollo was a real personality, Osiris was a genuine underworld fiend, Hecate actually lived and still does. The Hindu gods Shiva and the 8-armed goddess of death Kali are far more than man-made images. The images of the gods, falcon-headed statues, animal forms, provided a point of focus. Kali is even demonic-looking and is depicted as holding a skull in one of her hands, quoting Carol Brooks, "Idol worship. Spirits behind the idols." The city of Babylon is always associated with Satan's city, while Jerusalem is known as God's city. Satan was worshipped first at Babylon, and in that city, he began his mystery religion. The book of Revelation shows that the Antichrist will be supported by the false prophet. He is going to lead Russia and Muslim countries to attack the Jews during the 7 years of tribulation. First, he will deceive the Jews by making a peace treaty with them. Then he will allow them to build their temple and offer sacrifices. After 2 years, he will break his treaty with them and start persecuting and killing them. Since Muslims are going to join the Antichrist in the attack against the Jews, that means the teachings of Muhammad will be the main driving force. The same spirit that possessed Muhammad after the death of his first wife will possess the false prophet, who will support the Antichrist in his attempt to annihilate the Jews. Of course, the Bible shows that Christ will descend from heaven with his army of true Christian believers, those who died and went to be with the Lord, and those who were caught up during the rapture. The Jews will accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. Then Christ and his army will meet the Antichrist and his army of Russians and Muslims and defeat them at the Battle of Armageddon. After his defeat, the Antichrist and the false prophet will be cast into the lake of fire, where they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Now, who is that false prophet who is going to stand with the Antichrist? The false prophet of the end times is described in Revelation chapter 13, verses 11-15. He is also called the second beast in Revelation chapter 16, verse 13, chapter 19, verse 20, and chapter 20, verse 10. Together with the Antichrist and the false prophet, Satan will possess them both. This is the third evil trinity in human history. The first evil trinity was Semiramis and Nimrod, and both possessed by the devil. The second evil trinity was Khadijah, Muhammad, and Satan. Since the book of Revelation indicates that the army of the Antichrist will be mainly made up of Russia and Muslim countries such as Iran, Turkey, Libya, Sudan, and all other Arab countries, it stands to reason that the false prophet must also be a Muslim. A Muslim leader possessed by the same spirit that controlled Muhammad during his lifetime and inspired him to revive that abominable Babylonian mystery religion. Someone has the spirit of Muhammad, the spirit of violence, lust, hatred, like Ayatollah Khomeini, Osama bin Laden, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The same argument can be used to show that the Antichrist will be a Muslim too. The same evil trinity of Semiramis, Nimrod, and Satan which created the mystery religion of Babylon was repeated as Khadijah, Muhammad, and Satan and brought about Islam. Likewise, a similar evil trinity will join hands in the future as the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan, and cause the 7 years of the tribulation. The Antichrist will be joined by Russia and all Muslim countries, and gather at the Valley of Jehoshaphat to be engaged in the battle of Armageddon against Christ and his army. Revelation chapter 16, verse 16. We have stated earlier what will be the outcome of that battle, and what will take place immediately after it, the 1,000-year Christ's reign on earth, the millennium. I would like to conclude this chapter by stating an important warning. We know that Islam has been created by Satan to oppose the will of God, to persecute the people of God, Jews and Christians, to destroy other human beings, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, and atheists, and likewise kill the so-called hypocritic Muslims. But we should never treat Muslims as our enemies and seek their destruction or annihilation. The Bible tells us our real enemies are not humans, but Satan and his evil spirits. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The Epistle of the Apostle Paul to the Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 12. Accordingly, our real struggle and fight are against these evil spirits that empower Muslims, and cause them to commit all kinds of atrocities against non-Muslims and their fellow Muslims. As true believers in God, our primary weapons of warfare are not machine guns, jet fighters, rockets, tanks, submarines, automatic bombs, and nuclear weapons, but our prayers and the Word of God. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 2-3. By emphasizing the priority of spiritual warfare, I do not mean to say that Jews and Christians should be pacifists and inactive, and never engage themselves in self-defense against Muslim terrorists. We need to guard our countries, our children, and ourselves against any imminent or potential terrorist threats. Terror and terrorists must be pursued militarily and destroyed wherever they exist.